Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our special meeting of the Trade, Travel, and Tourism Committee. I'm Tracy Park, chair of the committee. I hope everyone had a restful holiday weekend. Before the clerk calls the roll this morning, I wanted to just share some brief context about why we are here in the 1-5 this morning. At our September 5th meeting, we considered and approved a motion from my colleague, Councilmember McCosker, related to the Pier 400 terminals, prior actions of the Harbor Commission and City Council, as well as issues related to automation, job training, and the future of the harbor's workforce. At that time, Councilmember McCosker, you asked that the presentation responding to your motion occur in the harbor area so that we could hear directly from the community and affected parties. Today's committee meeting honors that commitment and promise that I made to you that we would do it here, and we are here because I know how important this is to you and to your community. You and I both share the distinct privilege of representing two of the city's most important economic assets, LAX and the port. Together, they don't just serve as gateways for goods, commerce, and travelers. They are also foundational for our local, state, and national economies, employing thousands of workers with living wages and generating an economic impact far beyond their borders. Their presence is also acutely felt in our communities and neighborhoods adjacent to the corridors leading to and from these regional hubs and within their workforces. And because of their nationwide importance, the actions and decisions that we make related to the port and the airports will have nationwide repercussions. So it's up to us to ensure that their impacts are for the greater benefit of our city's residents, businesses, and workers, and that we create sustainable operations while we retain good-paying union jobs. So, Councilmember McCosker, it is a privilege to be here this morning, and to the community members that have made time to be with you, thank you for coming. I also want to thank our partners at the port, the city clerk, ITA, council sergeants, the CLA, and the city attorney for helping us organize this special committee meeting. It is actually no small feat to coordinate the schedules that are necessary to get the right pieces in place, especially on the Monday after Thanksgiving. So before we move on, Councilmember McCosker, would you like to offer some opening remarks?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just really do appreciate the opportunity that you have created. You heard our motion rapidly, understanding the importance to me, and I appreciate that kindness to me and to my community. I also very much appreciate that we are here in the port to have this hearing. I do look forward to hearing public comment, and then I know that you will have questions, but I'll have a series of questions that I want to walk through, and it may include amendments to my motion.
All right, thank you, Councilmember McCosker. I would be remiss if I didn't also offer you the opportunity to say good morning.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'm very happy to be here.
All right, with that, Mr. Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Park.
Present.
McCosker.
Here.
Soto Martinez.
Here.
3 members and a quorum, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clerk. So that brings us to public comment. Members of the public wishing to give public comment can sign up using the public comment card. These are available from the sergeant or the clerk. They should be in the entrance over there. Where is my council sergeant? Can you raise your hand? Oh, sorry, didn't see you over there. They can bring you one of these cards if you don't already have one. At this special meeting, we will be taking comments specific to the items on the agenda, not any general public comment. You'll be given 1 minute per item and up to a total of 2 minutes for all items. So with that, we will go ahead and open public comment. I have a handful of cards already. If anybody else hasn't had an opportunity to fill those out, you can get one here from the sergeant. But with that, I will call up the first 3 folks: Garrick Gillum, Tommy Feen, I apologize if I didn't pronounce that correctly, and Chad Lindsay. Come on up. Garrick, we'll start with you, Mr. Gillum. What items would you like to be heard on, Mr. Gillum?
Item number 1.
All right, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
My name is Garrett Gillum. I am a member of SEIU Local 721, and I am a deckhand with the Port Pilots here at Port of Los Angeles. As you will hear this morning, APM Terminals made commitments in order to receive a coastal development permit. However, they have not fulfilled the commitment they made. This is not acceptable. I work at this port. I spend more time here than I do at home, and the port has made huge efforts to clean up the air, but when a terminal makes a promise to get a permit and that permit is ignored, that's wrong. The motion that will be before you this morning simply requests accounting being taken of the driverless electric cargo handlers and the establishment of a workforce training program to help maintain the new automated terminals at Pier 400. I urge the committee to hold APM terminals accountable for the commitments they made to the port, the council office, and the harbor communities at large.
Thank you, Mr. Gillum. Next up, Tommy Feen.
Favai.
My
Sorry for-
apologies.
Yeah, my writing over there is not as up to par, but.
Thank you so much. What items would you like to be heard on?
Item number 1.
All right, you have 1 minute. Go
All
ahead.
right, thank you, Chair and Commission. My name is Tommy Favai. I represent IBEW, Electrical Workers, Local Union 11. We got a lot of our signatories that does work here at the ports, Port of LA and Port of Long Beach, when it comes to electrical construction. At, pretty much all the terminals here at the ports. And I understand that much has evolved and developed since the inception of the CDP permit, number 18-25 at Pier 400. And we appreciate the effort by APM Terminals to improve the environmental air quality and physical operations within the surrounding port communities. However, the APM Terminals remain short of its commitment to have a resilient workforce that can fully adapt to the automation infrastructure changes and the elimination of diesel fuel engines that charge the electric stations in Pier 400. The motion placed forward simply requested for accounting of efforts that have been taken, the driverless electric cargo handlers, and the establishment of a workforce training program to help maintain the new automated terminals at Pier 400. I urge this committee to hold the respective terminal operators accountable for their commitments to the port, the council office, and the harbor communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we will take Mr. Lindsay. And Mr. Lindsay, while you're coming up to the podium, next up behind them will be Peter Jabor and Noel Weiss. Yeah, let's hold off on that for a minute. Mr. Lindsay, what items would you like to be heard on?
Item 1, please.
All right, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
All right, good morning, committee members. As you said, I'm Chad Lindsay. I work for the Pacific Maritime. I'm the vice president here in Southern California. Pacific Maritime Association, or PMA, represents 70-plus shipping companies and terminal operators working at West Coast ports, including LA. For 75 years, we've negotiated and administered the labor contract with the ILWU. PMA is proud to be a major stakeholder at the port. We care not just about keeping the port competitive and running well, but also about keeping the communities around the port healthy and prosperous. We work in partnership with the longshore workers and their union leaders to make that happen. Based on my decades working at PMA and in close coordination with the ILWU, I can tell you that our ability to work together towards shared goals is vital in attracting cargo that supports jobs and livelihoods, both on the docks and far beyond the terminal gates. We also understand the concerns that arise when there are changes on the waterfront, particularly any change related to workplace practices. For us in the ILWU, our collective bargaining agreement plays the central role in addressing those concerns. We recently concluded a 13-month negotiation.
Thank you, Speaker. Your time is over.
Thank you for your comments. All right, next up, Noel. Oh, okay, all right. We'll withdraw that one. And then Peter, I know you had indicated, Mr. Jabor, I know you had indicated general comments, but it also says item number 1. And it may be the case that we'll
Yeah.
have some additional questions for you if the city attorney.
And so that's the request, Chairwoman, was to make sure that although not, the questionnaire was not directed towards APM terminals, certainly we're a subject of the hearing today. So we would like to do is provide a little bit more of a statement, longer than a minute, for the council. So if the committee would allow that, we'd be grateful for that. But let me know how the committee wants to proceed. So signed up for public format simply to reserve our right to speak today. Because we're the subject of the hearing, we'd like a little bit more than the 1 minute reserved for public, and that's the request.
Yeah, Mr. City Attorney, can we make an accommodation?
At this time, what we would allow is the 1 minute for public comment, and then at the time of the presentation, if there are questions, at that point, the member could come forward and answer those questions.
All right, thank you for that. So we're going to stick to the 1 minute for now. I think it's possible that there may be some questions for you, and we'd
Yep.
love to hear from you at that time then. So we'll give you the 1 minute on item 1. Go ahead.
Sure. So my name is Peter Jabor, Vice President and General Counsel of APM Terminals. As part of the Maersk Group and one of the largest marine terminal operators in the world, APMT is a global leader in the decarbonization of the supply chain. Although the technology behind zero-emissions straddle carriers has not advanced as rapidly as we have wanted, we've not paused our efforts. Today, the straddle carrier operations at APMT run on electric engines powered by renewable biodiesel generators, resulting in over 50% reduction in emissions at the terminal. The technology has simply not been there, but we've not paused our efforts. We've done the conduit work, we've done the installation, we've moved forward. Just these past few weeks, we've signed an agreement for prototype equipment that is zero-emission straddle carriers and also conversion kits to see if we can actually start converting the existing straddle carriers. These come also with charging stations. Charging stations, because these are prototypes, have different configurations. This is not just a standard plug-in and plug-out. These are container-sized charging stations
Thank you,
using
Speaker.
pantographs. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. I don't have any additional cards at this time. Is there anybody else here in the audience who wishes to give public comment that has not had an opportunity to do so? Anyone? Nope. All right, going once, going twice. That will close public comment. With that, unless there is any objection from my colleagues, I would like to move items 2 to 12 on consent. Okay? Fine?
Great.
All
Fine.
right. With that, Mr. Clerk, if you would, please call the roll.
Park,
Yes.
McCosker.
Yes.
Soto Martinez.
Yes.
3 ayes, and those items have been approved.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clerk. That brings us to item number 1. If you would please read the item for us.
Item number 1, Port of Los Angeles report relative to the status of the APM Terminals Pier 400.
All right, thank you. Again, I want to thank the members of the community who have shared comments today and who have made time to be with us. The things that we've heard already today in public comment are why we agreed to come here and have this meeting in person down here in the harbor area. I believe Mr. Soroka is with us. There he is. And he will be presenting the Port of Los Angeles report.
Be available for comments. I think he might have brief comments, but he'll be available for questions.
Okay, well, I assume you have some questions?
I do.
All right, well, Mr. Soroka, we're going to have you come on down then, if you don't mind. Thank you so much for being here. I know we've all had an opportunity to review your report, and I know that there are questions, but Councilmember McCosker, I would like to turn the floor over to you
Thank
to
you.
kick us off.
Thank you very much. And I would just ask, maybe it would make sense for Mrs. Soroka to take the table. I have a series of questions. He might be more comfortable. Would that be okay with you?
Fine with me.
Okay with the city attorney? This is his room, after all.
Thank you for letting us use your room, Mr. Soroka.
Thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate it and appreciate the use of the room. As you know, the motion really goes back to the 2019 application for the level 1 permit. So I want to just build the base for that. Back in 2019, APMT essentially applied for what? Can you just give us an overview of what they applied for?
You're referring to a coastal development
The coastal
permit
development permit, level 1.
for what we call here at the port trenching, cabling, and the extension of electrical conduit.
Right. And in the application for the permit, they actually described a number of activities and gave us a timeline for those activities. And I'm looking at the application now, page 2 of 4, and it looks like it was to apply for vertical rack installation, which would be planned to start in Q1 of 2019, charging stations, Q1 of 2019, fencing and traffic barriers, Q1 of 2019, and the Wi-Fi antenna installation in Q1 of 2019, with the duration of each of these taking no more than 3 months. That was in the application. It's really not a question. Was there, to your knowledge, was there any environmental review of the level 1 permit?
The necessary CEQA process and environmental review goes along with every project that we have here at the port. The CDP is a permit specifically related to those items that you had mentioned.
Yeah, and to your, so we did do an environmental review of the level 1 permit.
Yes.
Okay, so it was, do you recall what the document was?
No, I don't.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Did we, to your knowledge, and if there are other folks here that might know, to your knowledge, did we apply any conditions to the level 1 permit? In other words, let me back up and remind folks for the audience, and Mr. Soroka will remember this well. This permit was approved at the board, then was 245 and rejected at council, and then came back to the board and was approved once again. At any time were there conditions imposed on the level 1 permit, conditions that may or may not be attached to installing the charging stations beginning in Q 2019, working for approximately a month, any conditions that sort of held folks to the standard of the permit that was requested?
All of those conditions are outlined by the California Coastal Act and the Coastal Commission oversight for the coastal development permit.
So this might be for the city attorney then. Is it, I realize that we have the Coastal Commission requirements and the body of law that pertains to the port's plan, and the port's plan is essentially our certified local coastal plan here at the port. And I've read through the port plan. The port plan does talk about conditions that may be attached to level 1 and level 2 permits. It talks about them and describes that they may be attached, assuming that they advance the purposes of the port plan. Is it the city attorney's position that we can impose conditions on level 1 and level 2 coastal permits?
Councilmember, unfortunately, that's beyond my scope as city attorney for this committee. But if there is, if that is the specific points, I can, once after this meeting, look into the city attorney or city attorneys that would be responsible for that and be able to get them back in touch with.
So to be precise then, the question is, if an applicant comes to us with a level 1 or level 2 and says, for example, just taking an example out of the air on a level 1, that we are going to install charging stations, we're going to start on X date and we're going to finish 30 days later, can we impose a condition on the permit when we say yes, that you will do that? That's the question. Do we have the legal authority to do that?
Understood, Councilmember, but again, that is beyond my scope to advise, but I can find out who the city attorney or city attorneys are that would be able to answer that for you.
Okay, so thank you very much, appreciate that. I think too, the other second question for the city attorney then would be, if we applied such a condition and the condition wasn't met, would that be cause for the revocation procedure, which is also spelled out in the port plan? Would that be cause for revocation of a permit? And I think very specifically, how would that play out here in this particular circumstances? On back to the port staff or maybe the city attorney team, when we do issue a coastal permit, level 1 or level 2, who is the enforcing authority on the permit as to whether or not it is actually performed as requested? Is it, and this is not for the future, this is live for now, is it city staff, is it port staff, is it the city attorney, are there Is there someone in the city family who would help us with the enforcement of conditions or performance of a coastal permit?
And again, apologies, council member, that's beyond my scope, but I can, from the city attorney's perspective, attempt to find out who can answer that question for you.
We'll need to know who enforces on these coastal permits. And is there, particularly, is there a third-party right of action? Can a private party file? Is it up to the Coastal Commission? Is it up to, could the city attorney file, the city attorney on Main Street file, or is it the port staff? So maybe I have a question for, very clear, maybe this is for APMT. I just wanted to get, I have a question on what's the status. Oh, no, let me back up before I get there. There is a new practice, I believe, at the Port of Los Angeles that we will put into all permit applications a statement that the applicant will give us an analysis of effects on the workforce, jobs gained, jobs lost. Is that currently in effect with applications at the Port of Los Angeles?
Yeah, there are two reviews of that, Councilmember McCosker. One is through the environmental impact study and report that we do as a requirement of the state of California, which approaches many subjects, including that of jobs and employment. The second is in the port's application process. We issue a number of types of permits for activities here at the port, in addition to coastal development permits that you've outlined. And in those applications are specific line items for the impacts on jobs, gained, neutral, or lost based on project's intent.
Okay. So I saw that in the application back in 2019, there was the question, what are the number of jobs at the site? And the answer was varies. We don't know. And then there was, the next question was, what is the effect of this project on jobs at the site? And the answer was, it varies, we don't know. And we accepted those answers back in 2019. This is an editorial comment. It seems incredible to believe one of the largest, most sophisticated logistics company on earth, whose the bulk of their costs is employment, would not be able to answer either of those two questions. Defies credibility to the point of being not believable. I saw the application, and I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of the application for the permit in 2 days, but I saw that application. It didn't have either one of those questions on it. So my question is, and maybe this is going to a report back, are we asking folks when they pull a permit, what is the effect of jobs? What jobs do you have today? What jobs do they have after? And are we doing any kind of analysis of that for purposes of at least keeping track, but maybe also advancing our port plan, because we talk about the importance of the economy in the port plan. So I will ask, I don't think you have the answer to this one. I will ask that to come back. A couple of larger policy questions. Do we, when we take in an application for a permit, do we do any socioeconomic analysis, jobs and beyond jobs, so that, you know, we talk a lot about, let me back that up and say, we talk a lot about 1 in 9 jobs in the county of Los Angeles being related to the port. And that's 1 in 9 jobs, not because they're direct jobs. We're not employing at the port those folks. Folks who are employed by the port, in the port, are doing things that cause a ripple effect throughout the county, which is unbelievably beneficial. Do we do any kind of socioeconomic analysis when someone submits a permit to us on what will be the effect on jobs through the county?
If I may expand my answer just a little bit, what you're getting at is one of the more polarizing topics of conversation in our industry, not just here in Los Angeles and Long Beach and the Twin Port Complex, but across the globe in the evaluation of the 360 ports of global significance as tracked by folks like S&P Global and some of the other industry observers. Number one, we've seen great trepidation when it comes to this subject of automation, not here only, but across the globe. And for those who may not know me too well, I've been in this industry about 35 years, worked in the private sector 26, was posted and worked overseas 11, and I've been on the ground doing port operations in 50 countries. I've had a view of a lot, not everything, but a lot. There have been business models where an automated facility does not touch the headcount, payroll, or hiring plans for workforce. There have been others that slash 80% of a workforce, right? Your point about, hey, I don't know what's going to happen with this project and the jobs, incredulous, yes, to the observing eye. To the company who's doing something for the first time, they may not have a real line of sight on what this means, although some may see a foregone conclusion. And when we look at jobs and permits, I don't want to conflate definitions, but as I mentioned, the Port of Los Angeles, to which I'll speak, issues permits every single day of the year for different types of work, whether it be a filming permit so we can keep jobs in Los Angeles, from crews and lighting and staff work to the trucks and the caterers that serve the talent and the crews that are on deck, to harbor engineers permits, construction permits, and these CDPs. I would offer to say, from my experience, that a construction permit on a trench and cabling for electricity may not have an impact on jobs in and of that sphere. So looking at what you're talking about deserves a wide lens and a little bit of interpretation and dialogue from the numerous parties that play into this. We think about the economy and jobs every day, as many of you know who follow this port. For every 4 containers that we move here at the Port of Los Angeles, we create 1 job. It has been our focus to grow cargo volume because it does grow the jobs associated. How, the right way with the right intentions, are usually the outcome. But this is a super complex area. That 1 in 15 jobs in the city of Los Angeles, the 1 in 9 in Southern California, equate to about 1 million workers who rely on this port to do its business, so they have jobs. And while the Longshore group here at the Longshore, the clerks, the forepersons, and others within the ILWU are extremely important to all of us, there are another 985,000 jobs throughout the region in different areas of responsibility. So this is something that, while you and I have talked many times about the subject, deserves a little bit more of a focus, a little bit more of a look than just a broad base, hey, your job's going up or down, and things of that nature. So it's super complex. It's not designated to one type of permit. When we talk about permits at the Port of Los Angeles for marine terminal operators, which is mainly the subject of this motion, these are traditionally 25 to 30-year permits in duration. They typically require a tremendous amount of infrastructure development, of which we're traditionally responsible. We call that at grade and below. So think about pavement, cement, conduit, electricity, water, power coming in, fortified wharfs, the necessary dredging at the wharf side as well as the main channel to bring ships in. Everything above ground is typically to the lessee and how they want to start to design their business. Yep. Again, it's super complex to folks who are not here working every day, but deserves an equal, if not greater, amount of attention, so we all understand what's at stake, what can be done, and how we can move the needle.
Yeah, no, I first I want to say we have had this conversation many, many times, and we're going to have it many, many more times. And I have no doubt in your desire. I don't mean to imply that you don't have a desire to, maintain and grow the jobs and keep that ratio of 9 and 14 or 15 vis-a-vis the city and the county up. Totally get it, but we're each on the you and I are both on the edge of this sword, on the point of this sword.
Sure.
Yeah, and other folks have put us there. But with respect to this project, though, this permit, it wasn't a lot of construction work. I mean, it was estimated at $1.26 million. And it was described pretty simply, that simple list that I described of stuff to do. Do we know, and I know we know, can you give us an overview, or should I give an overview of the status of the implementation of the permit.
I'll let you start, please.
Okay, so I'm going to oversimplify, and I'll give you guys a chance to speak later, but essentially the trenching work is done, some cable put in, the area reworked so that it's more efficient on the use of on traveling across, through the yard, the sort of the short haul work or the work in the yard, and the autostrads are, I think 109 of them are there, and it is described as they have electric engines that have hybrid diesel. They're hybrid. They have diesel engines, and the diesel fuel is supplemented with potato chips, with vegetable oil or whatever. So it is burning on diesel to power, and the charging stations that are described in the permit, and that are designed to be able to plug in the strads, are not in. That's essentially it. Is it true that when that on these permits, you have to start the work within 2 years, and once you start the work, there's no expiration of the permit?
That's my understanding.
And then which is problematic, because someone could get the stuff that they want, automated equipment that runs on diesel, and then never, in a hypothetical, never, ever, ever get to the charging stations, and never reach the goal, which is the goal of the plan, the goal of everyone here, to stop burning diesel and stop burning coal and stop burning gas. Which is why the question is so important: can we attach conditions to permits to get the benefit of the bargain, if you will? Because as we sit today, there is nothing that requires these guys to put the charging stations in. Nothing. They got the benefit of the automated equipment, but we don't have the charging stations, and we don't have the full benefit to the environment.
Well, one point though, like everything here, it's complex, it's nuanced, it's individual conditions and opportunities. In this particular case, unlike any other port complex around the world, there is a deadline. And that is our deadline for zero emissions cargo handling equipment at the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles by the year 2030. Mm-hmm. Now, you're not going to have that kind of a deadline with every permit that comes up in the future, obviously.
Yeah.
But that is the goal that approaches. I know what you're getting at, and I like the idea of, can we put some timelines in that give certainty, et cetera. And I would also say in that case, again, just from my own experience, we're trying to get to a state of operations, zero emissions cargo handling equipment by the year 2030, when the machinery hasn't been invented yet.
Yeah.
Right? So that's difficult. Doesn't mean that our resolve has been any less. We're going out there all out every single day. But something that we have to take into mind, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah. So the opportunities for us to get to the 2030 and 2035 are, though, to attach conditions. I'll beat this dead horse. To attach conditions to things. The other opportunities with our leases. And APMT came in for a lease amendment or extension recently?
No, they have a lease that runs through the summertime of 2027. And then in that lease, which was of the 25-year variety or longer, they have 3 5-year options that they reserve the right to exercise. And that's, again, in that big lease that gives them the privilege of operating at the Port of Los Angeles.
When we grant leases or amend leases or extend leases, is it our opportunity, yes or no, to put in enforceable conditions that we might not have put into coastal permits?
Yes, and I will say this, that times change. And we've seen, even in my decade here at the port, that what seemed to be commonplace and normal practice in 2014 looks very different today.
Yeah.
So our mindset of modernizing as we go through, learn more not only technology, but norms, requirements, expectations of us are always moving in a direction where modernization has to be at the core thought of our existence.
I want to go back to 2019 and the ping pong of approved at the commission, disapproved essentially on a 245 and sent back to the commission, then approved by the commission. to go forward with this permit. And a great part of the public discussion was the environment, protecting the environment. Highly important to all of us, which is why it's dominating this conversation. And also a great deal of discussion about what would be the effect on the workforce. And with respect to item number 1, we had the statements, at least, in the application that charging stations would happen, all these things would happen, and I'll give the APMT a chance to describe why they said it if the technology didn't exist. I won't make you defend that. But with respect to the second, there was this much ballyhooed set of 2 things. One was the M&R, the maintenance and repair facility, to be built adjacent to Pier 4 at the same finger of land at Pier 400. And the other one was a blue ribbon commission that was to be established. Can you give me an overview of where we are with the M&R facility?
That was an outcome of the negotiation to automate, of which I was an observer and convener of sides, along with the previous mayor and councilman, to try to get some semblance of agreement between the employer and the Longshore Labor Union.
Yeah.
What I found in my experience is that when a company and its workers can agree upon a strategy going forward, that usually provides some type of optimism for a successful outcome. And when they don't, you wind up in a very different situation of finger pointing and folks going in different directions that don't necessarily combine to meet the goals that we all have for this Port of Los Angeles. As a point of negotiation to get this automation off the ground, which was symbolized by this coastal development permit in such a public way, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, along with the Pacific Maritime Association, agreed to some concessions to try to help foster jobs of the future. And it's been widely stated in our industry that as automation becomes more available, more possible, that we have to look at upskilling and reskilling the current workforce. And I think it was this Harbor Commission that said many times in the past, technology is coming, it's moving faster than we've ever seen, but we cannot leave the workforce behind. Right? So that's been our mantra, that's been our marching orders for some time now. And so these 2 sides, at the request of the administration, sat down to try to find out what some of those collaborative efforts could be. One of them was to set aside a training facility that would upskill current mechanics. There are usually, and again, the experts are behind me, but there are usually about 7 tiers of mechanic skills, from the person who changes a tire to one who works on the most complex, sophisticated, and newest equipment. And the training can get you to go up those levels. That's what we call reskilling. That's what we call upskilling. And then reskilling may be taking someone from a very different discipline, a longshore member, a marine clerk, and get them into a class setting that will reskill them into a mechanic's role and going up that ladder of the future. So that's what was negotiated. I think the guys behind me will have more details as to the goings-on in those negotiations and where we stand all the way until today. But I do know from public reports that that facility is going to be ready to go and start classes next February.
Yeah, so that was in July. The press announcements went out in July of 2019. And the press announcements are not always the best place to start research or finish research, but the press announcements were implied that it was connected to this project. And I'm sure politically it was. Mm-hmm. And the press announcements said that we're going to open, remember this is July 2019, we're going to open a reskilling, upskilling facility. It's going to train, retrain, upskill, and retrain 900 folks. I don't know where that number came from, and maybe PMA could tell me. And that it was, in part, an answer to automating this terminal. And, I'm only been here 10 months, but it was not being built 11 months ago. So it was delayed for some reason. And I don't know if you're the one to answer that or if that's PMA, but I do want to know about when it will start, and what is the plan on the 900, the 450 and 450? Is there really going to be an upskill and reskill plan, or has, as you've said, does the industry continue to change, and does that change our plans for the M&R?
Yeah, respectfully, I think you should ask the representatives behind me from those organizations you just mentioned. We were asked to be in that conversation for two reasons. Again, one, trying to keep things going, moving, and not impacting the economic or overall plans of the port. And secondly, to provide land for what was negotiated between the two parties to build this mechanics training facility.
Because very technically, it hasn't opened yet, very technically, I think the answer to how many folks have been upskilled, reskilled since July of 2019 would be 0, I think.
You have to ask those guys again. There's training and education that goes on every day. This specific outcome to negotiations can be addressed by the fellows.
Okay, that's fair. And then the Blue Ribbon Commission. So it was announced in the same press release to be a Blue Ribbon Commission to look at the future of work. Do you know?
I don't remember that specifically, and I was not asked to participate. I know that the County of Los Angeles, I think it might have been during COVID, had formed a committee to do a study in and around this space, but I was not a participant, and I don't recall a report being published.
Yeah, I will say that there was a Blue Ribbon Commission announced in the press release. There was a motion introduced. I do not believe that anyone was ever appointed or any Blue Ribbon Commission was formed. However, there was a separate action which could bear some fruit, and that was the UCLA Labor Center took on the commitment to do a study on automation, environment, efficiency, throughput, and that's still underway.
Yeah, and I'm a member of that committee along with many others, and I think it was driven by Assembly Bill 639. And so under the oversight of the California Secretary of Labor, we've had numerous meetings, both video as well as on-site here at the ports and in other locations, to try to answer these big questions and make recommendations to the state. And that committee is ongoing. I think David Libatique, we have a report back due next summertime?
End of year. Their statutory mandate ends at the end of 2023.
Okay. Yeah, so the committee under the auspice of the State Secretary of Labor will be sending a report back to the legislature, and the law, the construct of that committee expires at the end of this year. Under its current view and look.
Madam Chair?
Doesn't mean that conversation stops.
I may have more questions of Mr. Soroka and the port, but could I call up APMT?
Yes, let's do that, please. If you can come down to the table.
Thank you, Mr. Soroka. I really appreciate it. As they say in the old detective movies, don't leave town.
All right.
Thanks,
thank you.
guys. Would you reintroduce yourselves and maybe, reintroduce yourself, Peter, thank you, and maybe give me a minute on where you are with full implementation of the 2019 permit. I think you have to press the button there.
Okay. My name is Peter Jabor. I'm the Vice President and General Counsel of APM Terminals Pacific. So where are we on the progress? The simple response is we've not stopped, and we've continued to work through the pandemic, through the coronavirus, post-pandemic cargo surge, through to this day. What Executive Director Soroka said was correct. This is new technology. These are prototypes, equipment. This is an area where we've all wanted electric vehicles and electric infrastructure to happen faster. I look for examples, right? Look at LA Metro wanting to push back their deadlines to 2035. We continue to work on it every day with the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers. Kalmar is the leading edge in this area. We've done and used our global leverage to push them in this area. And so we're working on it every day. As I alluded to in the public comment, we're happy to share that we've actually now secured 2 prototypes of zero emissions, completely battery charged, no biodiesel, no potato chip oil. Also conversion kits, right? Because what we can't do is stop cargo from moving. So we also want to look at those 109 straddle carriers you mentioned, Councilmember. How do we convert those to zero emissions once it's ready? There are different battery charging options. There's a high power option, which provides fast charging but lower downtime. There's a high energy, which provides longer charging but then lower runtime. These are connected through different charging stations. That's the final piece of the puzzle. So we'll have these on terminal within the next 12 to 14 months. It takes that long of lead time, both for construction, shipment, these are prototypes, test it, and we move forward. We've not paused because as Executive Soroka said, the Clean Air Action Plan deadlines of 2030 are real. We, from an AP Moller Maersk perspective, we're part of the AP Moller Maersk group. We've committed to completely decarbonize by 2040. Obviously, the ships are the biggest challenge. The container handling equipment is something we've leaned into. Putting aside TRAPAC, we actually think we're one of the leaders within the Port of Los Angeles and within the country on driving towards zero emissions. And so we're happy with the progress we've made despite the obstacles, but we're not done yet on our race to zero emissions.
Great, thank you. A couple of questions before we go to your letter, which is very helpful, thank you. Did the conversion to hybrid electric engines require you to be automated?
So I go back to 2019, Councilmember Kosker, and I had the privilege of speaking in front of the Board of Harbor Commissioners for both of those permit hearings.
Yep.
And Commissioner Renwick at the time and said, regardless, are these stratocarriers coming? And the answer that I provided in 2019 was yes. We ordered hybrid electric stratocarriers in 2019 because we knew that the zero emissions technology was not there, but we were moving forward with the plans. Our plans to use automated equipment did not require the Board of Harbor Commissioner approval, and so we pushed forward in that way, knowing that we had to push forward. We wanted to set the future so that we could make sure that we could electrify well in advance of 2030, and we knew that there was going to be a road and a journey to get there.
Different question, though. I asked, for you to get to your zero emission goals, did it require automation? Does it require automation? Can you have human assisted electric equipment or hybrids with potato chip oil?
I'm sure you possibly can. The choice we made is to move forward with this mode of operation.
When you made the application, though, what I'm hearing from Gene, and I think from you, is that the technology didn't exist.
It's not that the technology didn't exist as far as was the technology commercially viable at the time? How long would it take to get there? Looking no different, again, we see examples across society today with no different with the difference between electric vehicles in 2023 versus where electric vehicles were in 2018. I think at that time you could get a Tesla or a Nissan Leaf maybe.
Yeah, so commercially viable or exist. So if it's not commercially viable, when you pulled the permit and said we were going to do this in 30 days beginning in 2019, we're going to put it in the chargers, you must have known then. I mean, the company must have known then that you weren't going to do that.
So if we think about the application process we're getting to, right? And so in 2019, we have a view of we need to plan 12 years in advance because these are large infrastructure projects. The reason that it's a 25-year concession from the Port of LA is we've invested hundreds of millions, billions of dollars into this facility. So you need to plan ahead. In 2018, the discussions we had with Kalmar, the equipment provider, is we'll get there, we're working on it, we're driving, we're going to be the first one of the race. So that application was put in 2018. We actually didn't get the permit until 2019.
Right.
We turned around to Kalmar, we say, okay, let's go, we're ready. It's not there yet, it's coming, it's working, we're in testing. We hit the pandemic, we still work through it, and again, the feedback we get from our equipment manufacturers, we're there, we're the best, we're driving.
But this isn't a pandemic issue. I mean, I get what you're saying, but, I mean, somebody made a choice to say on page 2 of the application, charging stations Q1 2019. No pandemic. No one had heard of COVID then. Approximately 1 month of duration. So somebody made a choice, and it certainly makes the application way more palatable to the world to say, we're going to be fully charged and plugging in, and for that we're going to have automated equipment. Not palatable to me, but to some people it might be palatable.
But Councilmember Kosker, right? So I wasn't the individual who filled out the form, so I can't speak to what those were.
Yeah.
I can speak to we wanted to be done sooner, but if you think back to the 2019 and the testimony we provided to the Board of Harbor Commissioners, and that was a lot of attention and focus for 6 months, we were very explicit that we were ordering hybrid stratocarriers to begin with because the electric were not yet available. And so we were asked specifically that question, what type of stratocarriers you bring in? We were very upfront at that time that the technology in that moment wasn't there for 100% zero emissions reliable to basically switch what is 20% of the cargo and take a chance on a prototype equipment. So we took a very responsible way, and what we did, if that 100 acres at the top of our facility, that's where we started testing in 2019 and 2020 to drive it, right? Because we wanted to make sure this equipment worked, it supported the cargo operations, and drove through it. So we did start that work right away. We did use hybrid electric from the start. which was the indication that the Zero Electric was not available, but we didn't want to wait for it. If we waited till today, and this is one thing, if we think about 2030, time moves a lot faster than we all appreciate. We are very thankful that we didn't only start to do the infrastructure work today in 2023, now that the equipment is becoming commercially viable. We're glad we started this process 4.5 years ago because we have a chance to make it ahead of 2030. We're not like Metro LA asking for an extension. We're not like other port operators in the Port of Los Angeles. TRAPEC is certainly ahead in the journey. We're a pretty close second, closing in fast. There are other marine terminal operators in the Port of LA Long Beach who we don't know how they're going to make it, and we're thankful we started in 2018. We haven't been as fast as we've wanted to, but our commitment to zero emissions has never wavered. No company globally is more committed to decarbonization than A.P. Moller-Maersk. We have put our money where our mouth is repeatedly. We will continue to do so, and we will not stop until we are absolutely compliant, not only with the Clean Air Action Plan, but our own commitment to the environment.
Thanks. So in a couple of minutes, I will ask DWP to come down and let us know about the status of applications you've made for those chargers. But before I do that, let's turn to your Exhibit C in your letter, which is really helpful, and that was the letter about jobs.
Yeah.
Really, really helpful. Very summary, maybe for proprietary reasons, I'm not sure. But here's, I can't say it any more politely or any more simple than I'll describe to you what I understand the operations to be before and after automation, and I want to know how these numbers could be true. So here's my sense of it. This is as a guy who, casualed 40 years ago, so the world's changed a lot. But under your old operation, a crane, human being running the crane in both instances, takes the can off and puts it on a chassis. That UTR driver, human being, drives it, and there's probably multiple 3 to 4 UTRs per crane, drives it to the yard, and a top handler, probably a couple of top handlers, or at least a few top handlers per crane, then stacks it. And then later when it leaves, another set of human beings, later when it leaves, a yard crane, human being, moves it. So we got human being crane, human beings, multiple UTRs, human beings, multiple top handlers, human being, yard crane, all working under the old model. New model is a crane, still I think a human being, although we'll talk about that on Wednesday. Still a human being, takes it and drops it for an autostrad. Autostrad, no human being, moves it to the yard and stacks it, no human being. Can gets ready to leave, autostrad moves it, no human being. So just on those moves, just on the simplest of moves, taking it off, stacking it, and sending it out, there's multiple, let's say, half a dozen or a dozen human beings, and then under the new operations, there's one human being, crane operator, and yet the information that you've answered, that I asked for on total man hours, sorry, sexist term, total head count, and person hours per TEU, the numbers don't change all that much. Where are the jobs that keep the numbers sort of uniform? Where are the jobs in the new operation?
So this goes to, so the new jobs are, you obviously have a lot of complex equipment that needs to be commissioned and also needs to be maintained and upheld. You also have a facility that's in transition, right? No different than all of a sudden day one, zero emission strads don't just pop up from a magic wand. Same thing is the change of operations takes time. So if you look at the period of time from 2019 through 2023, you have the pandemic, you have volume surges, you have ships queuing, you have hiring hall restrictions because can we find enough workers to work in the pandemic? You have a contract bargaining. In certain days, the automated side was not operational. In certain days, the conventional side was pushed more volume through. So you have, as Executive DeRoca said, a very complex environment. But what the numbers do show you is the biggest driver of workforce impact are volumes. And that's why the volumes, the workforce, reflects and follows the trend line of the volumes. Because not every job at Pier 400 is subject to automation, has been eliminated. Not every job is a status just pure change. it is a very complex ecosystem. You do have clerks, you have mechanics. Mechanics are working on things, not just autostrads, but they're also working on chassis, right? The number of mechanics working on repairing chassis with tires and mud flaps and lights is a direct reflection of how much volume is going through. And so those are jobs not impacted by automation, but they are impacted by the amount of volume. So you see in 2021, when you have the highest peak of the volumes, you have the most workers on terminal because you need
Well, but
all different types of crafts driving, pushing things through. So yes, there are impacts as you described the automation, and I think you captured
Yeah.
some of the work correctly, but it's much more complex than a simple 1 + 1.
But if UTR drivers are gone, and if top handlers are gone, and if yard crane operators are gone, you would think that, well, maybe, and the numbers remain fairly constant, you would think, man, there must be a lot more mechanics. But there's not. There's like, the mechanics number is pretty static too. I mean, they're up by, 40. So I'm wondering, where are these jobs that are any of these remote jobs? Is some of this technology and somebody off-site who's, no? For the record, are any of these remote jobs?
No,
No remote jobs.
no remote jobs.
What are the jobs that you think are replacing top handlers, UTR drivers, yard crane operators?
I don't think, Councilmember, I don't think it's a matter of replacing 1v1. The issue is, if you think about the facility, no different than the infrastructure work was not done with a magic wand, no different as the change in mode of operations. That's taken place over the last 3.5 years. So you're not going to see it immediate all of a sudden in a future perfect state where every machine works perfectly. All of a sudden, all these jobs have disappeared. That's simply not the reality. It's also why we've refused to speculate on the different types of impacts and hypotheses where it goes. We operate 65 terminals globally. These are very delicate ecosystems driven by volumes, driven by customers whose ships float that drive those dynamics. There's no secret, there's no magic here.
So all of these jobs that you're describing for the line 22 to 23, I think it's September to August 2023, all of these jobs are on the physical plant of APMT.
These are ILWU jobs, payroll jobs, driving and supporting it 100%.
Interesting. I'm just wondering how the classifications break down, because you do have fewer of the category. Would you agree that you have fewer of the categories I described? Because you don't have top handlers, you don't have UTR drivers sitting around while the automated strats are doing the work, do you?
So you don't, but what you do have here is the mechanics, as Executive DeRocco described, the mechanics with the most skill that can work on the autostrads have the highest pay demand under the collective bargaining agreement. So we've actually replaced the lower paid jobs with extremely highly paid at the top tier of the collective bargaining agreement with the highly skilled mechanics. So you actually have a change out of low skilled into extremely high skilled, and that's where the importance of the reskill, upskill effort and bringing the workforce along is critical, because do we want in the future jobs where people are driving tractors around in circles? No, we want to make sure we bring along the workforce so they can do the complex work of where the industry and society is headed.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll go back to the question, and maybe PMA wants to help with this. But by the way, I will say that the chart you gave me shows that there's only 40 more mechanics, which is good. 40 more mechanics. That would not be the number that moves the needle. Have any of the top handlers, the UTR drivers, the yard crane operators, have any of them been reskilled, upskilled, whatever term we're using? Are they getting new work, and is it turning a wrench, or is it working on software? What is it?
So what I can speak to is, and I'll let PMA speak to port-wide, right? Because one of the interesting things about this industry is you use a hiring hall concept. So ILW workers can work at different facilities. They work at APMT one day, Everport another day. They can work in Long Beach a third day. So that's why PMA plays an important role from a workforce-wide perspective and deals with ILW, how to support the larger ecosystem. From an APMT perspective, I go back to some of the arrangements that Executive Director Soroka mentioned in 2019 was committed already off the bat that 20 mechanics from the power shop who supported those UTRs, the tractors, changing tires, were moved over into the Autostrad and trained on how to support that Autostrad equipment. With 109 Autostrads on terminal, that is sophisticated work that, again, PCMC is actually the employer of those mechanics, but that's work that's being done today. by ILWU mechanics, work that did not exist prior to 2019, and work that's going to be needed in abundance in the future.
And these numbers are, PCMC workers are reflected in these numbers?
They are the mechanics.
Okay, well, it's not a big jump that explains it to me, but I appreciate that. Can I move to a couple, I want to go back to the environment. The environment is really, critically important, and it sounds like it's critically important to you.
Councilmember McCosker,
Yeah.
before you move on, I'm still not sure I heard an answer to the question. Have
Good.
the individuals that Councilmember McCosker described been reskilled or upskilled? Are they continuing to work for the company in a different type of trade or skill or position? Or
Yes.
have they been separated and moved on?
No, so at least 20 have been moved from what we call the power shop, where they were doing work on those yard tractors, kind of low tech, to the Autostrad. And all of those Autostrads today are supported by mechanics from the ILWU. So I can't speak, council chair, as to whether or not, committee chair, they were at APMT in 2019 at different capacity where it goes now. So that's, again, the beauty of the hiring hall concept. But I do know that there's 109 straddle carriers today, complex machines that are supported by ILW mechanics that were not being supported prior to 2019. So it's tougher for me to give you more specific just by the nature of how the industry fills jobs.
Understood. Thank you for the clarification. Go ahead.
Thank you for that clarification, and it's further complicated by the fact that you would have regulars. I mean, we're going to get down, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too far, because I'm going to suggest at the end we create a verification of all this with one of my amendments. But we have regulars, and then you have folks that are working out of the hall. And so regulars, I mean, you would really be able to keep eyes on them, and they would know, because they're supposed to be there every day. Folks out of the hall, I get it. I mean, you have different classifications at the hall. Some folks show up at the hall and they have a job until the ship's done, and then some have to come back day by day by day. So there's a lot of there's a great difficulty in verifying these numbers, and we have to get to the bottom of it.
But Councilmember, I will say, I understand the committee's aspect to looking after the community, and I 100% support that, and I understand that all the way through.
Yeah.
These numbers can also be verified by the ILW directly, because no different than the ILW after 15 months of bargaining wants to make sure that its members are getting the right hours for pension and for overtime and for double time and all those items.
Right.
The ILW has the ability to validate those numbers, and we're more than happy to support PMA working with ILW to again confirm those. But all of these numbers are there, and they drive some of the most important things, the economics about how people are getting paid.
And we are going to come to that. I am going to ask for a verification, a process to verify, and I get it. And let's be really, 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 really clear. My purpose is that I'm not a party to any agreement between the PMA and ILWU. I'm not a party to any agreement that you might have signed on to as APMT with as a part of the PMA with the ILWU. My job is to stick up for my community.
Understood.
And when we talk about 15 or 9 out of jobs, whether it's the city or the county, my job is to stick up for the local economy and for my entire community. Your business is your business with the union, not my business. Can we talk about the environment a little bit?
Yes.
So, and these were really excellent questions that came to us from the Wilmington Neighborhood Council, who does some exceptional work on asking me questions. So they pushed me to the wall. I'm going to let them do it to you through me. What was your plan in 2019, knowing that wasn't commercially available to, and why did you put on the application that we would have charging stations sometime in 2019? It's in the second half of 2019, apparently. And maybe you'll say you didn't fill out the application, so you don't know. What's the plan?
So the plan, sometimes when you do brand new things that have never been done before, you have to follow a little bit of what I like to call the field of dreams mentality. If you build it, they will come. So we had to create the demand with the equipment manufacturers that said, we need you to supply X. Can you supply it? They said yes. We have 65 terminals globally. We're the second largest global marine terminal operator. We have the ability to create a market demand. So in concert and with the support of Port of Los Angeles, we went in 2018, said when the Clean Air Action Plan was updated in 2017, we paid attention. And we went to our equipment manufacturer and said, we need to move forward. We're going to need to meet these deadlines ahead of 2030. There's significant capital investment in all the equipment that actually moves cargo around, and we need to think in 15-year terms, because these equipment lasts for 15 years. So when you make investment decisions, this isn't like buying a car. This is buying a house. And so really what we needed to do then was exactly what we did, is we went to those equipment manufacturers and said, we need to meet these deadlines. Can you meet them? And they told us yes. And we said we need to start immediately because it's going to take time because we're deploying equipment at scale that's not been done before. And so that's the approach we took. And so we had the best information that we had. And what did we do? Again, I go back to Field of Dreams, because we did this on the ocean side with the first green methanol vessel that's ever sailed. We built that vessel before there was green methanol. And what do you know? Wake up today, now there's all of a sudden green methanol supply, because we created the demand. And so that's what the Port of LA and the City of Los Angeles did in 2018. Said, let's go ahead, let's be leaders. If we're going to be leaders, we need to invest, we need to lean in, we need to be flexible for what the future is. And so, yes, we thought that we'd be farther ahead than where we are today. But what we did in 2018, people thought we were crazy. How can you put this one amount of money? How can you drive forward? How can you do this? Now, we're being accused of being behind the ball. And it's not because a lack of pressure or the fact that we were trying to trick people. That's not how AP Moeller Maersk, it's not how we do business. We've been around for 100 years. We intend to be around for another 100, if not longer, by doing what we say and saying what we do. And so in 2018 and 19, did we wish it was ready to go in 2020? Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to say, as a community member, and in those hearings of 3,000 people, what I heard was, and you're going to say you guys didn't say these words, that you said other words, but the thrust of the presentation was, we're going to automate, and it's going to clean the air, and we're going to have charging stations in 2019. So that whole, we do what we say, and we say what we do, or whatever, kind of falls apart right there. But I understand what you said. I totally, completely get it. That, you know, you can only do what you can do. But those were the words, and that was what was spread around.
But
Can I ask you about the data? Let me ask you about the environmental data, because you've given us a lot of information, also helpful, on emissions. And again, the critical part of this is making sure that we can comply. You've given us a bunch of data on the efficacy of reducing emissions because of the hybrid engines, and also on the efficacy of reducing emissions because you've redone the lanes, and I don't mean to diminish that, that's real, redoing the lanes in and around the facility. Who collects who actually collects that data? Was that independently collected?
So that was collected by APMT. The methodology is the same one used by California Air Resource Board and Air Quality Management District. And it basically goes upon what's the type of engine, what's the fuel, and what are the hours runtime. And based upon that, what is then the impact on the environment measured through nitrous oxide, diesel particulate, and other kind of environmental standards. So that was the assessment, done using the same methodology that CARB and air quality do as well.
So it is, you take the type of engines and the operations, all self-reported, and then you extrapolate and do the math, and you give us a number.
In summary, yes.
Are there collection stations, are there air monitoring stations in and around the facility that could verify this information?
I'm not familiar with monitoring stations. Certainly they're not APM terminals, but if there are, they would be the city or the ports.
Port, do we do that? Could you come on up? Thank you, Mike. You can stick around.
I heeded the warning to the Executive Director Soroka to stick around and figure out. I'll wait till I'm dismissed.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, good afternoon. Mike DiBernardo, Deputy Executive Director here at the port. Yes, we have 4 monitoring stations around the port that are doing analysis on a daily basis, and they are posted on our website.
So you're intimately familiar with the response that we got from APMT because you reviewed it and you helped provide the report to me.
Yes, sir.
Is there any way of using those monitoring stations to verify the information that we have coming out of APMT that in fact these hybrid engines and the relaning the facility has brought down those emissions?
The challenges with the charging monitoring stations is that it's collecting other data as well. So it's not just collecting what's taking place at the container terminals, but just everything else that's taking place around the community as well. So we have one in the Outer Harbor, we have one in Wilmington, we have one in Terminal Island, and one in San Pedro as well. So it's collecting other data as well.
So this would go to APMT and to all of our other efforts if we're going to get to 2030 and 2035. Is this an effort that we're going to expand to make sure that we are staying on course? When folks make commitments to us or when we hold them to commitments, are we going to be able to test and verify for outside acronyms I can think of one in particular that would want to know how we're doing on bringing down our emissions.
Yes, so we do an annual emissions inventory and study, and it's usually published every year by the port of how we're doing collectively throughout the port.
But are you telling me that using the current monitoring, we would be unable to verify the assertions APMT has made for the current operations, the new operations?
For APM, yes, we would not be able to do that because, again, it's collecting everything.
This gets to one of the things that came up in the material that we've collected for this meeting. Preceding our motion, the Sierra Club did some excellent work. And the Sierra Club put in a Public Records Act request asking about the charging stations and asking about the plug-ins and what fuels they were running on and how emissions were coming. Sierra Club, before my motion, was all over this. And they made a PRA to us, the city family, and the particular member of the city family was to the port. And the response back to them was generally, we don't run that operation, so we have no information. Am I being unfair when I say that?
I'd have to look at that and see that, but again, we don't run the specific terminal operations.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So it raises the larger question of whether we can put ourselves in a position, and I'm going to shift over to the big issues out there, our Clean Air Action Plan, the 2030, the 2035, the fact that AQMD is looking to do something to put us, to collectively put us in a position to make sure that we bring down emissions terminal by terminal by terminal and the port as a whole. Will we put ourselves in a position, going back to the head of this hour, where we impose conditions on permits, where we put language in leases, and where we have the technological ability to verify things like emissions, or the thing, emissions, so that we can actually hold ourselves accountable to ourselves and to the world on the Clean Air Action Plan?
We could, and again, anything that you change in a permit that we have with the tenant is obviously some bargaining that needs to take place,
Yeah.
some negotiating that needs to take place.
Yeah.
And anything that we do for a coastal development permit would require coastal commission approval as well. So anything we change in our port master plan,
Yeah.
with anything that we add to that would require coastal commission approval.
Yeah. Okay. Let me go to, can I go to the next permit for a second? Thank you so much. You're so accommodating. I really appreciate you. So on Wednesday of this week, there's a special meeting of the port. And at the special meeting of the Port Commission, they're going to be considering the next port permit. It's a permit to replace some cranes here for APMT. And so in my position, before they even finish the first permit, we're going to the next permit, but that's just me. But in this application for the cranes, my reading of the analysis tells me there's no that it is exempt from environmental review. Is that true? Is that the case?
We analyzed 19 cranes out there, and
Yeah.
that's what's going to be replaced out there is 19 cranes. So they're replacing like for like.
So back in 1999, when those cranes came in, the last time they happened, we did do a supplemental environmental impact report.
And then there was one in 14, I believe.
Yeah, and we did environmental analysis then.
Yeah.
Why not now? What about 2023 bringing in cranes tells us that it's no longer worthy of environmental review? Because my sense is that bringing in new cranes is going to, at the very least, extend the life of those operations. And even if they're not adding a crane, it's going to extend the life of what is currently hybrid diesel with potato chip fuel operations. I think it's going to be a question for Wednesday.
Yeah, there's a
But
public
I'm
hearing taking
surprised.
place
It's a
that day.
public hearing then. I'm just surprised that something that was worthy of environmental documentation and review before is no longer. And it comes on the heels of this, where we're talking about a permit that had significant environmental commitments that will be met, but not yet met. So not really a question, is it? Can I ask DWP to come on up?
Stay, I'll leave.
Nice try.
Thanks. If you could tell us your name, please. And your title.
Freddie Ceja with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Ceja, thanks very much. Are you familiar with this, over the last hour, I'm sure you are familiar with this operation and the needs for electrical infrastructure?
I did review it prior to this meeting, yes.
Have there been interactions between DWP and this particular operation to electrify the equipment?
Not to my knowledge, but I did read in the report that there has been communication between the port, LADWP, and the company. I'm not sure how many of those conversations, but I will tell you that in the 2 times that I've inquired with our new business unit at DWP, they are in charge of new electrification. There have been no permits or requests for electrification at Pier 400.
A word to the wise, you need a long lead time on DWP. Even though Mr. Ceja came all the way down here and is gracing us with his presence, I will say they are extraordinarily difficult. So if you think you have any immediate plans to plug in any equipment, that would tell me you don't.
Councilmember, so putting aside the fact that there have been extensive discussions with LADWP, which including Marty Adams, so I'm a little bit surprised to hear that testimony today. One of the issues we have, and one of the reasons why the coastal development permit, I think is a little bit of genius in the way it is we think about how we're going to electrify the future. We just had the port and the city announce $1.7 billion from the federal government from a hydrogen hub. We also understand from LADWP, although they have significant electric supply, it'll take years to connect that supply to the port in case the port would ever fully electrify. So one of the issues we have to figure out also ahead of 2030 is, to your point, when can LADWP supply the connection of the power in the next 3 to 5 years? Will that connection be all electricity? Will it be hydrogen? Where does that go? And so that's one of the challenges that we as a marine terminal operator ahead of the Clean Air Action Plan have, is understand how are we going to meet this? But that's one where we are engaging with LADWP. We are engaging with the port, who is also in regular contact with LADWP about what is that actual final power source and how do we drive to it. But that's one where we took an investment and a chance 5 years ago on electrification, which no one was talking about hydrogen in this way 5 years ago. But we will continue to work with LADWP, with the port, with the city, to make sure that well ahead of 2030, whether it's hydrogen or electricity, we're able to meet those zero emissions deadlines. Because I know that LADWP feels that pressure as well.
No, they do, absolutely. And I appreciate, I'm sure that you have had conversations with Marty Adams. He won't be the one filling out the application, though, and charging you up. So I would just say get on it.
Understood.
Get on it with DWP. Can I ask about the cranes, because it relates to this? Are the cranes larger, smaller, same size as the cranes you're replacing?
They're approximately 39 feet higher, but they are consistent with the other crane profiles at Pier 400 and around the harbor in the Port of Los Angeles.
So they're 39 feet higher than the ones you have at APMT, but they're similar to other cranes?
No, 39 feet higher than the ones they'll be replacing. So you have 3 cranes, older cranes, that are no longer big enough to serve over 60% of the vessels that call APM terminals.
Right.
So what we've done is made a tens of millions of dollar investment to make sure that we have the right size cranes that handle the vessels that now call Port of Los Angeles, because the vessels have grown in size faster than the cranes have.
Right.
And so this is a replacement insofar as how to continue to handle the ships that call the Port of Los Angeles and can continue to keep that cargo moving. So to Mr. DiBernardo's point, from our perspective, it's a simple replacement. If you look around the harbor, the profile is all generally the same. These are electric-powered ship-to-shore cranes. They are not automated, and we believe they're actually critical to ensure that we continue to keep Port of Los Angeles competitive, because if we don't have cranes that works the vessels that the shipping lines are deploying, they will go to those ports that have the cranes, even if it's only 1 mile south to Long Beach.
I think you said 2 different things, though. You said that they're basically it's a simple replacement. Then you also said that 3 you're replacing are not capable of working the ships. I'm not against cranes. I mean, certainly against cranes. Certainly 4 cranes that have human beings operating them and moving cargo. Totally, completely. But this is expanding the ability to do work.
It's actually, I would argue too, though, if we think about what is the standard for coastal development process, and unfortunately, I am, like the city attorney here today, I am not an expert in CEQA and coastal development and the Coastal Act, but I've become one over the last 5 years, a little bit of one. there's no significant adverse environmental impacts. If you think about the larger ships are newer ships. Newer ships are more environmentally friendly. The larger ships also allow more cargo, which means that per TEU, it is actually better environmentally for the cargo to arrive on bigger ships and on newer ships. So if we think about what does this enable, that actually is significantly positively impacted from an environmental perspective.
Right.
And not,
It's not for today, but the reason why it's a level 2 is because it is a significant addition. I mean, by calling it a level 2, there is the word significant. And then the next thing you said is that there's no adverse environmental effects, which is probably correct. That's different than it being exempt from CEQA. It's just two different things, but we'll talk about it on Wednesday. Completely different things.
understood.
At the moment, I have no further questions.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember McCosker. Councilmember Soto Martinez, do you have questions?
Yeah,
And who do you have the questions for? We have a few potential options for you.
No, I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you, Councilmember McCosker, for so many questions. I feel like I understand this industry a lot clearer. I do want to say that I was a little concerned about the way you broke down the industry and the jobs that are sort of not being done. It certainly doesn't pass my scrutiny. I think automation is a serious thing. And I get some of the answers that were given here today about the ecosystem changes, and it's true when you do one thing, it pulls another way, and sometimes jobs are created. I don't buy it at this point. I know we're going to look more into it, but as someone who's seen automation get rid of so many industries, I'm deeply concerned about that. And I don't think the choice here is that do we choose the environment or do we automate? We have both. I think we can have both things, and so I look forward to digging more in on this issue. I know you'll dig in it more and really break down those numbers and classifications. And I think those concerns from the community are certainly valid and are very present for me as well. I can't imagine so many jobs being gone and how that affects the economy, how it affects neighborhoods. And I know I'll do everything to support you in that because I understand how of a serious issue it is in your community. I've canvassed this community many times and talking to so many neighborhoods, and they say, I have a good union job, and we should have more of that, not less of it. And so hearing the lack of clarity on those numbers, it gives me a lot of pause. And so I just want to say thank you for really digging in and enlightening me on this issue, and I hope you know that I'll be supportive as I can, because this issue is important to me.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Soto Martinez. Well, it does seem as though we have some opportunities for some further clarifications or potential reports back. I've heard you mention you may have some amendments, so if you would like to walk us through what you're proposing.
Sure. And I just want to explain kind of where I'm coming from. And thank you very much to all the speakers, and I really appreciate the time and the earnestness with which everyone's trying to answer these questions. And thank you to my colleagues for indulging me on this. I know it's unusual. But I want to go back to 2019. I mean, in 2019, we had a very large drama, a passion play here in the harbor with literally 3,000 folks coming to multiple community meetings. And whether it was intentional or not, it was set up as there will be this thing called some automated equipment, and there will be an improvement of the environment because of the plug-ins of this equipment, and there will be a training center for upskilling and reskilling, and there'll be a blue ribbon commission report, although I'm less concerned about that. And today, now fast forward, 4 years, we do have 109 of the 130 autostrads in, and they are hybrid, and they are burning diesel that is less pollutant than pure diesel, but it is diesel. And we don't have the charging stations. We don't have the M&R facility, which I visited last week, and it's on its way, but it's not here yet. And I, too, have a lot of lack of clarity. I guess you can't have a lot of lack of clarity. I have a lack of clarity on this jobs situation. And so we're 4 years in, and we are on the verge of another permit issuing, and I understand they're unrelated, although they do work together pretty closely. And so for all of these reasons, I'm going to ask for a couple of amendments to the motion. I'm going to ask for the motion to stay right here and for some more reports. And for my first amendment, I want to add, I therefore move that the executive director of the Port of Los Angeles be directed to establish a baseline staffing plan for the APMT and a guarantee for hires from the maintenance and repair facility at Pier 400. I further move that the executive director of the Port of Los Angeles provide a report and regular updates to the Trade, Travel, and Tourism Committee on the timeline for the completion of the 2019 Level 1 CDP 18-25 scope of work, which parenthetically is the environmental stuff. So with those two additions, I would ask for a second.
I'll be happy to second that.
Thank you.
And I will also be happy to keep this here in committee, and we'll look forward to those additional reports back.
Thank you.
So with that, Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Park,
Yes.
McOsker,
Yes.
Soto Martinez.
Yes.
3 ayes, and the item will be continued, I believe?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, with that, is there anything else before us?
The desk is clear.
All right, thank you so much. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. No problem. Good data.